What's going on, everybody? Welcome to episode 110 of the Finale podcast. Today I'm joined by Henry. First time appearance for Henry on the Finale podcast. I go to school with Henry. He's become a pretty good friend of mine over the past few months, and he's a big NBA fan. So we're here to talk some NBA, a little bit of NFL as well. So, Henry, if you could introduce yourself, just say a few words.
Hey, I'm Henry Buckin. I thought you introduced me pretty well, but yeah, I'm from Cleveland, big Cavs fan. So I'm very excited about this sort of shock season under Kenny Atkinson.
Yeah. Henry, of course. Yeah, Cleveland, as you mentioned. So yeah, the Cavs, man, they're doing really well. We'll get into them as we go on here, but we're just going to start off with some NFL news. We've done NFL episodes for the past, however many. I mean, we've been doing it since August, it seems like. And so we're going to start off with that NFL news. So the playoffs are about to start. Regular season just ended. Had a few head coaches fired already. But we're going to start off with previewing these playoff matchups. We talk about the Vikings a lot on here, of course, because have a lot of Minnesota people on the podcast, including myself. And didn't end the regular season how we wanted to, but as we were talking about before the podcast, Henry got another chance coming up here in the playoffs against the Los Angeles Rams, a team that the Vikings lost to earlier on in the season on a Thursday night on a short week. So it's a great opportunity to kind of respond to that abysmal showing, it seemed like, probably the worst showing they had all season. So I'm looking forward to it. But Henry, are there any playoff matchups that you're looking forward to in particular this upcoming weekend?
In all honesty, yes. There's one involving the Tampa Bay Buccaneers.
Of course.
I'm a little bit of a traitor, as you know, to the Cleveland Browns. I'm taking a break. It's like an abusive relationship where I'll be back because I don't know how to love myself. But for the moment, I'm all about the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Baker Mayfield, my favorite quarterback of all time. So I'm very biased, but I do think their defense can hold it together. They've had some injuries. I think there's the potential there for a deep run, and I think it'll be a great matchup against the Commanders for sure.
Yeah. No, I mean, Baker's had a really good season. They ended the season off on a strong note, of course. And yeah, they can definitely beat this Commanders team. I mean, they're inexperienced, the Commanders are. Jaden Daniels' first playoff game. Now, a lot of people are looking forward to that. But I think if you guys bring your A game, I'm going to just call you guys since you're a Bucks fan now. I'm going to say you guys can win that game, of course, because you'll be at home. You guys just have the more experienced team, and Baker Mayfield, the way he's playing, I think he's going to be really successful in that matchup. But you never know really with the Commanders. I mean, they're so inconsistent. I think they lost to the Cowboys like twice this year, but they also have those performances where they can beat the good teams and come up clutch late like they did a couple weeks ago against Philly. So, I mean, it's just an unpredictable team, but I think it's a good matchup, first round matchup for sure for Baker Mayfield and the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. For me, though, when I look at all these playoff matchups, I think there's some really good ones. Um, I'll start off with Packers Eagles. I mean, these two teams played in week one in Brazil. Very close matchup. This one's going to be in Philly. The Packers have been struggling of late, two losses in a row, I believe, against the Bears. Of course, that was a disappointing one. And then the Vikings. I think they can win this game here as an upset. They upset the Cowboys last year as a 7 seed, going to Dallas and winning that matchup. First time a 7 seed's ever won a playoff matchup in NFL history. So I think they can rewrite history with the way they've been playing. I'm sure they have big expectations for themselves, and Jordan Love has to play a lot better if they're able to have a chance in this game. I think they can capitalize off the fact that the Eagles had some rest as well, not playing their starters in their final game of the regular season. So I think it's kind of a closer matchup than maybe people will expect. But I mean, the Packers are a team that no matter who they have behind under center at quarterback, they can always compete and they can always, make a run at it. And then, last year they almost won in the second round as well against the 49ers. So they're my sleeper pick if I had to choose one. So I think that's a game to watch for sure. When I look at the AFC matchups, I think they're pretty straightforward. I feel like the home team is going to win every single one. You could say the Chargers could beat the Texans with the way the Texans have been playing against better teams this year. But I feel like the Texans will show up at home and win that one. Wouldn't be surprised if the Chargers get a win there. But if I'm not mistaken, I don't think Justin Herbert's had his first playoff win either. Uh,
No, he had a
yeah,
30.
Yeah,
lead.
yeah, that one against the Jaguars, I'm trying to yeah, recall. So pretty tough. I think this can be an opportunity with the way the Texans are playing for sure. But we saw last year, I mean, against Cleveland, what they did at home.
Yeah.
And I wasn't even expecting that. I thought Cleveland had the advantage in that one. And we saw what happened. But home field advantage is definitely real in the playoffs. But yeah, I mean, these NFC matchups are a lot closer, it just seems like. Vikings Rams, of course, that's going to be a close one. And yeah, it should be a good wild card weekend for the neutral fan. As a Vikings fan, I mean, it's going to be pretty stressful. Um, but it's an opportunity to kind of forget about what happened on Sunday and get an immediate sort of revenge game, I guess, against a team that you lost to earlier on in the year. Not an easy team to beat. Nakua and Cup at receiver is very tough. Kyron Williams had a very good game against the Vikings earlier on in the season, and Vikings fans know a lot about Matthew Stafford with his time in Detroit and what he's been doing in LA. I mean, he's already got a Super Bowl and he played really well in the playoffs last year. So I expect that to continue. But again, they're a team that rested in Week 18. So we'll see what can happen. But that's going to be a Monday night game. So extra day of rest is going to be good for both teams, I would say. And yeah, should be an interesting matchup. Um, let's see. Who would be your sleeper playoff team, though, Henry?
Well, I think we're of similar minds in a lot of ways. I think, yeah, I agree with you that the Packers, in terms of big seeding upsets, I think they have the best chance of pulling off a win like that. I probably would pick the Chargers over the Texans. I think they're better coached than they have been in the past, even if they don't have the same wide receiver talent that they have in past years.
Hmm.
And I think the Texans just, they've stumbled a little bit to the finish, even though I mean, they won their division, but that's a weaker
Yeah.
division, the AFC South. I uh, I agree that the Rams and the Vikings. I think that's going to be tight. I think that really could go either way, especially in LA.
Hmm.
I mean, obviously we saw the Vikings drop that game early in the year. There's a controversial, you know, missed face mask there
Yes.
on Darnold. But I think, yeah, I think the Rams are a tough team to face with all the talent they have at skill positions. And then obviously, as I was talking about the Bucks, you were talking about how unpredictable the Commanders are, but the Bucks, I mean, they've been all over the place.
Yeah. Yeah.
They've beaten four NFC playoff teams. They've beaten the let me see if I can do this off the top of my head. I'll be kind of impressed if I can. But Lions,
Yep.
they beat the Commanders week one, which
Yep.
obviously isn't the same because Jay Daniels has, progressed throughout the season. They beat the Chargers and they beat the Eagles also, but they also dropped two games to the Falcons in their division. They gave up 800 yards passing and eight touchdowns to Kirk Cousins, which is unbelievable in 2024. Uh, and
Yeah.
then if you look at I actually, I'm prepared for this, believe it or
Mhm.
not.
Okay.
Um, if you look at their defensive ranks in terms of points allowed, they're 30th in the NFL in the first half, and they're second in the second half. And
Mm.
some of that can explain, but some of it is just completely inexplicable. Um, so, and then Baker, you never really know what version you're going to get because obviously he had 44 total touchdowns this year, but he also led the league in interceptions. It's going to be a completely unpredictable game, but I'm excited to see that. I do think I'm talking a lot, but I do think if the Bucks they got hot at the right time, they had I believe they were fourth in points scored and third in total yards as an offense this year. They can get hot at the right time. I do think they can be dangerous and make a run too. Um, I mean, the semifinals. I think it's possible,
Mm.
but
Yeah, no, I mean, you came prepared there. I mean, that was pretty good stuff. Yeah, I feel like, I'd agree with you on a lot of those points. I think it kind of showed itself in the first half. The Bucks were losing by 10 against the Saints, and just second half was a completely different story. So, yeah, both these teams are kind of unpredictable in their own way. So I think it makes for a really good matchup for, the first weekend of the playoffs.
Mhm.
Uh, but yeah, moving on. Let's get into, your bread and butter, the NBA, Henry.
Yeah.
Your Cavs are off to a flying start, 31-4, 5.5 games ahead of the Boston Celtics. They're at the one seed, of course, in the Eastern Conference. I mean, what have you made of this flying start for the Cleveland Cavaliers?
So before we get to anything else, I think it was around 10 games ago that you said the Cavs were holding on longer than you expected. Just wanted to say on
Yeah,
camera
yeah.
whether you
All
were surprised at
right.
all that we're 31-4 at this point, on pace for 70 wins. The East runs through Cleveland.
Yeah.
All right. Just wanted to get that out of the way. But moving forward,
All
uh,
right.
I'm very excited, obviously. Um, I mean, last year, they had a very predictable offense in terms of statistically. They're very average. I think they honestly were lucky to draw that Magic team in the first round. I think a lot of matchups they probably wouldn't have gotten out of the first round, but I do think they're a different team this year. I think everyone's playing for each other. I think they have an incredible amount of depth off the bench. They have shooters everywhere, and they might not have one top 10 player, but I think they have three or four all-star caliber players, and I think that's in the modern NBA. I think that's enough to compete for a title. That doesn't mean they'll win, but I think they've about as good of a chance as anyone. Not quite, but I think they're one of those three best teams in the league.
So, when you guys had JB Bickerstaff, he kind of led you guys back to relevancy, but
Mhm.
wasn't quite able to get you guys over the hump when it came to playoff success. So, what do you think has been the biggest difference between Bickerstaff and Atkinson?
Well, um, I think part of it doesn't even come down to Bickerstaff. I think he got a little bit unlucky last year with some of the injuries that they suffered. I mean, Donovan Mitchell was out a lot. Garland was playing with a broken jaw, so he was not 100%. And then Ty Jerome and just bench pieces like that were out all year. So I
Hmm.
think part of it is that, but I think they've been a lot more creative in the ways that they use players like Evan Mobley. He's taken the big jump this year, a lot of initiating the offense, and I think that's really made a difference. It's really because I believe they have again, this is stuff I looked up before. They have the most points per 100 possessions in the league right now, and that's a huge change from last season or the year before. So um, it remains to be seen whether they can keep that up in the playoffs to the same degree, but I'm confident that they're a completely transformed team this season.
Yeah, I mean, you guys are a top 10 offense and defense when it comes to offensive and defensive rating. So I don't think that was the case last year. I think your offense was around like average in the league, and your defense has been good for, ever since you guys had those two big men, I feel like. But yeah, your offense is taking a step forward. Of course, not only Evan Mobley, but Darius Garland. I mean, he's been really good this year. I've been, impressed with what he's shown. I really enjoyed watching you're not your stars, not your all stars that you mentioned, but the other guys like the Karis LeVerts. I mean, that's been really good to watch. Max Strus in there now. That's been good as well. We talked a lot about Ty Jerome earlier on in the season. So there's a lot of guys that you guys can throw at people, and that's the depth that you mentioned. So I think that's always good to have when it comes to the playoffs because I don't know, most teams do run a smaller rotation, maybe like an eight-man rotation. I don't know if that's going to be the plan, but you guys have so many pieces to throw at other teams, and it just seems like you guys are playing much more in unison versus like guys like Donovan Mitchell just being the guy to just put you guys in games. It seems like you guys have every single chance to win, and you never know who's going to be the one that's going to contribute the most in the game. So I do really like your team. I did say, you called me out on it. I did say that I didn't see you guys, continuing on this hot streak. I thought it was too good to be true, but obviously 35 games in, you guys have 31 wins, so I was wrong there.
I,
Yeah.
I will say, since you brought it up, Karis LeVert, I mean, obviously averaging fewer points than he has in the past, but I think this year has been so much better. In the past, he'd be one of those guys who would frustrate me a little bit as a fan because he would disrupt the flow of the offense, take a lot of ISO possessions and take mid-range jump shots, but his shot selection has completely changed. And yeah, I think he's definitely the most valuable player off their bench. He makes a huge difference.
Yeah, man, very skilled. And you guys just have so many players. Like I was looking at the stats earlier on in the day. I mean, George Niang, I mean, he's always just been a really good utility player. Sam Merrill, I mean, just as a shooter. You guys just, who else? Okoro. I mean, I don't know what he's contributing this season, but I thought he's always been a solid defender. Offense is really the only question with him, but I think you guys just have so many pieces to throw at other teams. And when you're that good defensively and you can score at the rate you guys can score at, it's really tough to guard. So I think you guys are going to continue to, be at the top of the East. It's going to be tough, of course, to hold off a team like Boston. But with the way you guys are playing, it doesn't seem like it's, luck at all. It just seems like you guys are a very skilled team and it's just like, will it translate to the playoffs? So I'm looking forward to seeing how you guys would match up with the New York Knicks team or a Celtics team in the playoffs. I think that'd be interesting. But yeah, very good start so far. But moving on, Phoenix Suns, of course, Henry, we go to school in Phoenix, so this is a team that's pretty close to us, but they're going through some adversity after they started the season off pretty strong. They're now, I believe, 16 and 18 last time I checked, and that's not good at all. But they have dealt with injuries. But recently, they just announced that they will remove Bradley Beal and Yusuf Nurkic from the starting lineup, and that's obviously been something that's like kind of been like a surprising thing, I'd say, especially with how successful they've been in their careers. Bradley Beal, of course, being an all-star for many years and just being a star player, coming over in that trade, you're not expecting this to be the outcome. But this is what it is, and it kind of, brings people questions with whole Jimmy Butler thing that, that could be a trade path to see him in Miami. But of course, he has the no trade clause, and he even said it himself, I believe, after their game last night that, it's in my hands where I end up. So, what do you think's kind of going to be the future here for the Phoenix Suns?
Honestly, I know this is not the best thing to say considering I'm living in Phoenix. I love it here, great city. I don't think they're getting past the first round. I think so. If they trade for Jimmy, I have no idea how they would trade for Jimmy. With for me, I don't know why Miami would want Bradley Beal, but to put that aside,
Yeah.
for um, I think when they traded for KD and they paired him with Book, looked really promising. Um, I mean, Devin Booker by 25, he'd been to the finals. He had led a team in scoring. He's leading a 60 something win team. I think he just hasn't quite taken that next step that some people expected him to take, especially as a scorer. I know he's struggling with the shot a little bit right now. Kevin Durant at this stage in his career, it's tough for him to play anywhere near 82 games, and it's tough for him to maybe carry a team the same way, even if he's still the same elite scorer that he's always been. But yeah, I think honestly, Bradley Beal isn't quite the same player he was 3 to 5 years ago. I understand why they're taking him off the bench. They need a little bit more defense in that starting lineup, but I just think there's too much talent out west for them to really be more than a first round exit this season. And I don't see with their cap situation how that's going to improve going forward.
Yeah, that's the tough thing about making those trades, and I think they're probably in an even tougher position than Minnesota was in, when it comes to being a second apron team, because they have a player with a no trade clause, and how are you going to get out of that? Of course, like you mentioned, I don't think many teams would want to trade for Bradley Beal, let alone Miami Heat trading away Jimmy Butler, a valuable asset. So it's like, how does that situation come to an end? He's going to have to agree on something with the team. And yeah, I don't think they're improved this year by the looks of it. I mean, I thought that the starting lineup on paper it looked good when you look at Tyus Jones coming in there, paired with Nurkic, and then the big three, but it hasn't been a great lineup defensively. Offensively, it's been all right, but that's what you expect. Defensively, it's just been something that they struggled with. It seems like for a couple of years. So this is what's been happening, and of course, a lot of people are upset with Nurkic as well. Let's not forget about that. I think that's not been a great pairing there in Phoenix, and he's had better times in his career. So it's pretty odd. This is a very expensive team, so I expect changes to come sometime soon. But of course, they are in the first year with a new head coach as well, so that's kind of tough to deal with. But yeah, 16 and 18 right now. I believe that put them at, around a play-in spot outside of the top eight. If I want to say, oh, they're 12th seed actually. Let me correct myself. So I think they can, figure it out. But I mean, this is not where you want to be when you're a Suns team that's very expensive and you're trying to compete in the Western Conference. And it's even worse than last year. And last year they got swept by the, Minnesota Timberwolves. So I think they're trying to figure something out. I feel like, they could make some moves at the trade deadline, but they're, second apron team. So of course you have to ship out, as much money as you bring in. So, they'd have to part ways with some sort of rotational talent or somebody like, a top player. It's likely going to be Beal, but I don't know what the pathway is for him to get out of there. So it's going to be interesting to see what's to come in the next month or so when the trade deadline comes. And then moving on, OKC Thunder, man, they're looking really good right now. Last time I checked, 15 game winning streak. So they're flying. They're beating really good teams. They just beat the Celtics. That's impressive, and everybody's contributing. Of course, SGA is, balling out. He's doing his thing, and one of those MVP frontrunners once again. And you could see him getting it this year with, him not getting it yet. But I mean, just everybody on that team. You got Lou Dort contributing and just continuing to improve as an overall player. Jalen Williams, I mean, he's again ascended where, he's kind of reaching those really high levels, maybe even all-star levels, considering how good they are as a team this year. And then you just got all those like players that can just fill in and do their thing. You've got Kenrich Williams, you've got Hartenstein who came over, you've got Josh Giddey, you've got Wiggins. I said Josh Giddey, not Josh Giddey. You've got Wiggins. Um, but you got so many players. Isaiah Joe is who I meant. You just got so many players that can contribute. And they just re-signed or just gave an extension to Caruso.
Mhm.
So I mean, it's just they're a really good team defensively and offensively, and they're just continuing to be, a team that you can see being good for a really long time, considering all their assets that they have. So, what have you made of their start to the season? And actually, let me ask you that one question first. I don't want to ask you a double-sided question. Journalism 101. All right. So yeah, what do you think of their start?
Okay, are you ready for this?
Yeah.
Uh, okay. So right now, per 100 possessions, they're giving up 102.7 points, and the league average is 112.9.
Hmm.
No team has been 10 points better than the league average in terms of points that they've given up since the Bill Russell Celtics in the 1960s. So I've been ringing the bell for the Thunder. I mean, obviously they've always had a great regular season record last year. It's a little bit of a playoff letdown, but I think especially if they can get Chet back, I think and he's fully healthy. I know he hasn't been able to do much activity in rehab, but I think with all the pieces they've put together, they have one of the best defensive teams that we've seen in a very long time. And I also think, I mean, Shea, I think he should be the MVP this year. With the way that I mean, Jalen Williams is tremendous. They're great offensively. They're almost historically great defensively. So I think they're more than the problem. I think they should be, I mean, huge favorites out west, to be honest, at this point. I know that sounds a little crazy when they haven't done it yet, but I think they just have so much talent locking teams up on the other side of the ball. That in the playoffs, that's really going to be a problem for anyone they go against, and especially if they get Chet back, because Hartenstein has been great. If they can get Isaiah, if they can get him and Chet playing together, then they don't have that disadvantage going against bigger teams, where maybe you saw that a little bit against Milwaukee in the NBA Cup final. Maybe right now they don't match up perfectly against the Cavs with Jared Allen and Evan Mobley, but yeah, I just I think they're really really well set up, not just for the future, but to contend for a championship this season.
Yeah, no, I mean they look really good. Um, and you look at the teams in the playoffs right now, the teams that have kind of separated themselves in the West. It's the Thunder, the Rockets, and the Grizzlies, and I'd favor the Thunder over those teams. You saw the Thunder and the Rockets playing the NBA Cup semifinals, and it kind of seems like they're a level above them. They're of course a little bit more experienced than them, and then the Grizzlies. I mean, they're a really good team as well, but I feel like the Thunder just are a little bit more well-rounded. So. Last year the Thunder went to the second round, lost to Dallas. It's still a long season. Of course, there are all those teams that always make those second half of the season strides, and they can be really good to end the season going into the playoffs with some momentum. But the way the Thunder are playing right now, it's hard to imagine who they're going to lose to, and they're 30-5 on the season. So that's just it's ridiculous how good they're playing right now. And they were down even against the Knicks and late in that game, and they still found a way to come back and win. It's just they're such a resilient group, and like I was thinking about it earlier, just for a little football reference. I'm like, what NFL team does this team remind me of? And it's clearly the Detroit Lions. Just resiliency. They're never say die, never out of the game, always just come, and can come back out of nowhere. And the way they have that camaraderie with their group, it seems so like eerily similar to what Detroit Lions and what they do, and just the vibe of that team. So I really like how they're playing right now, the Thunder, and I think they can be a very dangerous team considering the experience that they now have coming into the playoffs. So I think that it's only going to continue, and yeah, we'll see what happens. But before we finish off the podcast, of course, wanted to talk a little bit about the Timberwolves, my team. We're struggling. I'm not gonna lie, we're hovering around 500, 35 games in, and not a great feeling. But there's a lot of changes, happening a lot, with the lineups, and of course, with the trade preseason, just kind of having to work through that. But I think players have kind of figured it out lately. I don't know how much input you can add into this, Henry, but I feel like, overall, the team's kind of figured out how to play with each other a little bit better. They found some successful lineups, and it's kind of been working, but it's an inconsistent group, I would say. And that definitely showed itself when they played against the Pistons the other night. And it's frustrating basketball at times. A lot of stagnant offense. When you have those games where Anthony Edwards has those 50-point games, and you're still unable to really generate a lot of team basketball in those games. It just it's kind of like a damn, like 6 months ago this was not the case, or however many months ago when we were in the playoffs competing for a championship. So we're moved on past that trade. We're here now. I think Dante DiVincenzo's added a lot to this team. Initially wasn't great, but he's added a lot. I feel like Julius Randle, not a fan favorite to say the least. But he gives us some playmaking, of course. I think that's something that he has over Cat, but again, not expecting him to bring us what Cat brought us by any means. Gobert, scoring has definitely dropped off a bit, rebounding as well, but I think last game was a promising sign. He had 18 rebounds last night against the Clippers. I think that was really good. Jaden McDaniels slowly getting better, but again, inconsistency from him. And we just removed Mike Conley from the starting lineup, a guy that's been in the starting lineup ever since he got traded here a couple of seasons ago. So yeah, just a lot of different things. We're trying new guys in, like of course Rob Dillingham's a guy we drafted. He was getting some minutes earlier on. He's injured. Josh Mina, a guy we drafted a couple of years ago, has kind of got that ninth spot in the rotation. So I mean, what's kind of been your observations from this up and down season so far from the Timberwolves, Henry?
Yeah, I think you're right that you can provide a lot more insight since this is your team that you cover. But I think, I mean, I think it's at this point it's not smart to dwell on that trade this summer. I think there was no way that was going to make them better in the short term.
Hmm.
Anthony Towns is just such a huge loss. Probably their best offensive player. While he was there, maybe their best overall player, even better than Anthony Edwards. But I think it's yeah, I mean they still have the pieces to be a very competitive team. I think Anthony Edwards is going to have to, you know, really step into that dominant role, really be, one of the better players in the league. But if he can do that, if the team can gel, I think, yeah, I don't think it's too late to turn things around at all. I know they're around 500 right now. I don't think that's where it's going to be forever.
Yeah, I mean, this is a new role for Anthony Edwards. I feel like a lot of people always considered him the number one option when Cat was here, but it was really just them two 1A, 1B sort of situation where they both kind of played off of each other and were really successful. But now this is a different role for Anthony Edwards where he's really the focal point and he's, of course, shown his frustration already with the double teams that he's been getting. And that's just going to be the coverage that he's going to see if, he's this great of a player. And the other guy's gonna have to step up. And, I think the 50-point game he had was a little bit more scoring focused, but a game like yesterday where he had 37, I think 7 and 8, that's a game where you can kind of see, okay, the other guys are showing that they can also score, and it kind of leads him to a little bit more openings, and it's more successful that way. So I think as long as his teammates also contribute, and guys are hitting shots, and I think Anthony Edwards can have a lot more openings and can have a lot more success. So I think yesterday was a promising game. They have a back-to-back, of course, playing tonight, I believe, against the Pelicans, and Zion Williamson's going to be returning, so that should be an exciting one. But yeah, but also like I was thinking about this too. I mean, this is pretty obvious, but like big market bias, you know what I mean? And I was thinking about doing this for one of my stories coming up, in in class because just the way that Cat is received and perceived now that he's in New York compared to in Minnesota when he was considered this soft player, it just
Mhm.
it just speaks to like the big market bias and how, everybody just wants these stars on the small markets to go to the New Yorks and the LAs of the world, and just they can get the ultimate praise. But when they're, seen in these small markets, they always get bashed, it seems like. And it just is showing with Cat because Cat, man, he got it all when he was in Minnesota, especially after the Jimmy Butler situation. And you're just seeing it in New York and how he's adored and just everything like that. I mean, he was doing what he was doing in New York, what he was doing that in Minnesota. The only reason the numbers weren't the same is because our teams were just a lot more balanced, I would say. And, he wasn't able to score as, much as he was earlier on in his career when he was a first or second year player. Once you got a more talented team, he kind of, just sacrificed a little bit more for the team. But what he's doing in New York, I mean, this was the player that I always thought. I always thought he was the third best big man in the league behind Embiid and Jokic. And you're kind of seeing it clear as day. Probably going to be an all-star starter this year. So, that's just something I had to talk about, get off my chest a little bit too, because I mean, we see it all the time. So, yeah, like I said, it's kind of not like something I just came up with, but just something I just have observed because Cat's a player that, Minnesota fans know how much he's received a ton of criticism.
Are you counting Giannis as a big man there, or are you just talking about like centers in general?
Centers,
Okay,
yeah,
okay,
centers,
yeah.
straight centers. So I'm talking like the Bam Adebayo, guys like that.
I agree with you
Uh,
there.
yeah, so centers, yeah. But when we're talking about big men, I mean that's a different conversation because then you have to include someone like Giannis, and it's a little bit different. But
Sure.
centers, I mean, Jokic and Embiid, I feel like they're in a league of their own. But when you look at that third guy, I always thought he was the number three guy because he's a lot more well-rounded. Even people used to take Bam Adebayo over him, even when he was in Minnesota. I never saw it because I thought Cal was just a lot more skilled.
Mhm.
Um, and now you're seeing it with the numbers, and it's a lot more like okay, now we see it when you're putting up multiple 30 and 20 games a season. It's it's tough. So I think I can't be like, oh, I'm mad or anything because I always liked Cat. So I'm like when I see Cat in Minnesota, I mean in New York doing his thing, I just want to see it continue. But I'm just, I kind of keep an eye on how like the media talks about him, especially in the national landscape. They definitely are showing him that love that you get when you're playing in New York. So definitely
Absolutely.
it makes sense, but just something I might want to touch on you know uh, if it continues, which I imagine it does, and we got uh, the stories coming up. So that might be a pitch I put in. Yeah,
Yeah, that sounds good for you. I think you'd do a good job of that.
but yeah.
Are we getting on script here, or are we ending
I
this
mean,
pod?
anything else you want to talk about? I mean, that was everything we had on
I
as
just yeah,
topics.
I think it speaks to a bigger problem in the NBA as a whole.
Okay.
Teams like the Lakers and the Knicks get so much more coverage than other teams right now. I think like the Lakers, I understand LeBron's there. I understand arguably the greatest player of all time. I understand Anthony Davis is there as well, but they've been the rest of the roster is incredibly flawed. They've been together now since 2019, so nothing's really new there. His son is there, but his son's played like 22 minutes this season. But I yeah, I think I mean objectively speaking, from a purely basketball perspective, I don't think the Lakers are that interesting of a team. I don't think the Knicks. I mean, because I think the Lakers clearly have their ceiling. I think the Knicks are playing better basketball, but I think yeah, there's so many teams around the NBA that deserve more coverage than they get, and so many great players. And sometimes you never really see that until they move to bigger markets, which is something, I think the league could improve on for sure.
Yeah, that's definitely been a thing for a very long time, and you don't see that as much in the NFL. Where you have these, it really doesn't matter where you play. You can play in Green Bay, and people are gonna just love that team. They're gonna get coverage because they're just a historic franchise, and they get the results. So I think that also contributes to where I feel like the NFL just does a better job of putting the best players out there. They do it right away as well. Like when you're starring as a young player, they put you out there, and I think the NBA does a good job of it. It's not like it's I think you have other problems maybe in the MLB where the marketability is not the best. I feel like the NBA is better than that, but I think definitely there's a bias towards shifting it towards the bigger markets, and there's a lot of stars all over the league. So feel like it's just been something that's been going on, but I'm sure it's been talked about. But yeah, the NBA, if they could improve that, that'd be nice because I will say they make an effort for the players like Anthony Edwards. I think putting the Timberwolves on Christmas is a statement, but there are just some teams in general like that you can also kind of give a little bit more attention to the Cavs, the Thunder, the Grizzlies. Those guys have star players too. So we also want to see them as well because, like you mentioned, with LA, I mean, New York is one thing. New York's actually a good team, but with LA, I mean, they're capped. Like they get so much coverage, but they're capped at a certain ceiling. We know what their ceiling is, and it doesn't seem like they can exceed it. They haven't exceeded it since they won a championship. So I think that's another thing to look at too. But yeah, um, a lot you can go into with that whole thing.
Yeah, no, I could talk about the Grizzlies as well, but I want to let you do things with your
No, I
life. I know
mean,
you're busy.
no,
So you
go
got,
go ahead. I mean, go off script. We,
I
we
think, I
can.
think, I know Jimmy Butler wants his money, but I think fundamentally, I know news came out today that he was telling people basically don't trade me anywhere other than Phoenix. Do not trade me to Memphis, no matter what. But
Uh,
I think Jimmy's fundamentally the type of player that could take a team like that over the top to really be a top contender in the league. They're so deep. Like they're the deepest um, team I've probably seen in a long time. They have about 13 or 14 legitimate like rotation caliber players. They have I mean honestly my top one in rookie of the year voting for me personally at this point is definitely Jalen Walls,
hmm.
and Zach Edey is up there as well for me. So there's a lot of amazing things going on in Memphis as well that maybe isn't getting the type of coverage that it quite deserves. But they're almost there. They're almost with those top teams, I think.
Yeah, I mean they're a really good team this year. I could see them making a run at the conference finals for sure. And they, like you mentioned, they always. I feel like when they've been good, they've had a really deep rotation. I can remember the last time they were, a two seed. They had a deep rotation in the playoffs. I think the year after Minnesota played them, they played the Lakers, but they had injuries, and that whole John Morant situation kind of messed up their season a little bit. But they've always, kind of been a team that's been able to put out a lot of different type of players. I remember guys like John Conchar just like killing the Timberwolves back in the day. So, they have some guys that can definitely make some things happen. I know what's his name? I think it's Jay Huff. Yeah, Jay Huff. It's been a guy that I've been hearing about.
Yeah.
Um, Luke Kennard's making some plays off the bench too. Scottie Pippen Jr. has been a guy that's been talked about plenty this season. So yeah, they can. I feel like they have some experienced guys that can make this team go to another level, considering the other inexperience that they have on the roster.
Mhm.
So yeah.
Yeah,
Anything
agreed.
else, Henry? What else we got?
I mean, I could talk for another hour and a half about Baker Mayfield, but I think everyone here is probably good. So,
Yeah, we
no,
get the idea.
this is really awesome. Thanks for having me on the pod, Marcos.
Oh yeah, of course, and I'll be back in Phoenix soon, of course, and we'll have to do it in person. That'll be even better experience. So yeah, I'm looking forward to seeing you when I get back, and I appreciate you coming on.
Yeah, thank you, man.
Yeah,
Take care.
so yeah, thank you, and you as well. This was episode 110 of the Finale Podcast, and I will see you guys next time.